What happens when a CEO trades his corner office for a loading dock and finally sees what his workers endure? Vince, Fairburn had inherited the logistics company from his father 6 years ago. It had expanded fast 5 warehouses across the state, over 200 employees and contracts with national retailers. But lately, something gnawed at him. Turnover was high in the warehouse division, and customer complaints about late shipments were piling up. His district manager kept blaming lazy new hires and staffing gaps, but the excuses were starting to sound too convenient. He wanted to see it himself, not from a camera feed or a filtered report on the ground, so he made a plan. A corporate chain this size meant that workers at the warehouse level had never seen him in person. Most wouldn't even recognize his name. He grew a beard, wore glasses, and borrowed the name Cal, a quiet, middle-aged guy supposedly going through a midlife career change after closing a hardware store. He chose Warehouse 3, located 2 hours out of the city. It was one of the older warehouses, and according to HR, the highest in employee complaints. They were short 3 loaders, and no one asked questions when Cal showed up Monday morning after applying through a temp agency. "Name?" the warehouse manager asked, barely looking up from his clipboard. "Cal Turner." "Great. Grab a vest. You're on loading with Foreman Rick today." Rick was a thick-set man with a shaved head and a permanent scowl. He didn't bother introducing himself, just barked, "Keep up or get out of the way," before throwing a clipboard into Vince's chest. Vince spent the morning hauling pallets, strapping boxes, and pushing carts onto the bay. It was hot, loud, and fast. He struggled at first. His hands weren't used to this, but he kept his head down and worked. At one point, a young guy next to him dropped a box. It wasn't even a big deal. The tape had just come loose, but Rick snapped. "God, Leon, are you stupid or just useless?" Rick shouted. "I told you to double-check the straps. You want to get someone fired on your second week." The kid, a skinny, nervous-looking guy, froze. "I'm sorry, I didn't. Don't talk. Just do what I tell you, or better yet, don't do anything. You're only making it worse." Vince stopped mid-lift, his gut twisted. The way Rick talked to Leon, it wasn't just harsh, it was humiliating, and nobody said a word. The others all kept loading like it was normal. At lunch, Vince sat beside Leon outside by the loading dock. "You okay?" Vince asked. Leon gave a tight nod. "Yeah, just learning, I guess." Vince looked at him. The kid couldn't be more than 20. "You shouldn't let anyone talk to you like that," Leon shrugged. "I need the job. I was out of work for 8 months. Vince didn't push, but he noted it. That afternoon, Vince saw more of it. Rick barked orders, cursed when things weren't done his way, and slammed clipboards on tables. He openly mocked Leon's small build, called another new hire slow as a snail. And once, when a woman from the sorting area asked for help moving a damaged pallet, he said, "What, you want me to break my back 'cause you're too weak to do your own job?" It was constant. But what stood out more was how the others tiptoed around Rick. No one spoke up. No one defended each other. They just worked faster, quieter, like they were scared. That night, Vince drove back to his rented motel room, hands blistered, back aching. He stared at the ceiling for a long time. Had this been going on for years? How didn't he know? He thought about his dad, how he used to say, "Don't lead from behind a desk. Lead from the floor." Vince had forgotten that. Tomorrow, he'd be back, and he'd be watching closer. Because something was very wrong in Warehouse 3. By the end of his first week, Vince had memorized the rhythm of the loading dock, the way pallets rattled across concrete, the shifts in temperature near the overhead doors, the subtle glances exchanged between workers when Rick raised his voice. But more than the grind itself, he noticed the silence. No one offered ideas. No one asked questions. People moved fast, spoke little, and left the moment the clock hit end of shift. On Monday morning, Vince arrived early before the lights flickered on, before the first trucks pulled in. He stood by the breakroom door, holding a vending machine coffee, watching as a few of the crew trickled in. Leon was among them, rubbing his eyes, a faded hoodie over his uniform. "You sleep at all this weekend?" Vince asked. Leon shook his head slowly. "Drove my cousin to a night job. He just got hired at a bakery in town, only 1 car between us." "You always this early?" "Only way to get the 40 hours. Rick gives the overtime to whoever shows up first." Vince didn't respond right away. Instead, he watched as Rick strutted in 10 minutes later, coffee in hand, laughing at something on his phone. He didn't acknowledge anyone. That day, Vince made a point to rotate jobs. He helped in the sorting section, ran inventory with the scanner gun, even handled returns for a couple of hours. It gave him an excuse to move across departments, talk to different people, and see more than just Rick's domain. In the sorting aisle, he worked beside a woman named Teresa, mid-50s, fast hands, and a sharp eye for mislabeled boxes. She barely glanced at him the first hour, but after a while, curiosity crept in. "You're new," she said, placing a sticker on a box lid with practiced precision. "Yeah, trying to learn all the lanes." She gave a dry chuckle. "That'll wear off. Been here long? 8 years. Long enough to see 4 managers and 3 HR reps. You ever work under Rick?" She paused. "Unfortunately." "What's that been like?" She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "He's not the worst I've seen, but close. Thinks yelling is leadership, makes up rules on the fly. If you're not in the dock crew, he doesn't even pretend to respect you. Has anyone ever reported him?" "You mean officially?" "People tried. HR comes down, he smiles, says the right things, and nothing changes. Next week it's back to the same mess. Most folks stop bothering." Vince didn't answer. He didn't need to. He'd heard enough. Later that afternoon, he returned to the dock for the last few hours of his shift. Rick was in rare form, slamming the side of a pallet with a metal bar after a load shifted, then throwing the bar down so hard it bounced and skidded across the floor. No one said a word. They just worked around him. Vince caught Leon's eye briefly. The younger man looked exhausted. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, and his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted straps on a half-loaded pallet. Rick noticed too. "Leon. You blind or just trying to trash the shipment? That strap's crooked. Do it again, and this time try using both eyes." Leon froze mid-movement. Vince stepped forward. "It's fine, I checked it. It's centered." Rick turned, his expression hardening. "You check it." "Since when do you decide what's fine?" Vince didn't flinch. "It meets the standard, unless the standard changed." Rick walked over, standing inches away. "You've been here, what, a week? You don't get to talk about standards. You just do what I say. Even if it's wrong." Rick's voice dropped. "You trying to start something?" "No, just trying to do the job right." Rick stared at him for a moment, then turned away, muttering under his breath as he walked off. But the damage was done. The others had heard, and for the first time, Vince saw something shift. Not much, but a few eyes lingered on him longer. A few shoulders straightened. That night, Vince stayed late under the pretense of helping with inventory, but really, he wanted to speak to the night shift supervisor. He found her in the receiving office, Angela, a tall woman with a direct gaze and a matter-of-fact tone. "I've noticed some things on the dock floor," Vince began cautiously, "especially about Rick." Angela sat back. "Let me guess, he's a bully with a clipboard and a god complex. You've seen it too?" "Seen it. I've documented it. HR has a whole folder, but he's tight with the district manager, so nothing sticks." "Has anyone gone over the manager's head?" Angela gave a bitter laugh. "You think anyone down here has direct access to corporate? They don't listen to us. We're numbers." Vince nodded slowly. "What would you do if you could make one change?" She didn't hesitate. "I'd fire Rick today. Replace him with someone who actually knows how to lead instead of intimidate." Vince left not long after. The next morning, he skipped the dock and shadowed the returns department instead. It gave him a chance to talk to Marcus, a veteran employee who handled damaged goods. Marcus was quiet, methodical, and commanded quiet respect from the younger guys. "You ever deal with Rick?" Vince asked while they repacked items. Marcus gave a low grunt. "Had to. He used to work my lane before they moved him to loading. He wasn't any better back then." "Why do you think he's still here?" "Because he moves product fast. That's what they care about. Not how many people he burns doing it. Speed over people. Every time." That afternoon, Vince watched Rick berate a driver for arriving late, a driver from a subcontractor who had nothing to do with warehouse logistics. The man barely spoke English, but Rick didn't care. He mocked his accent. Loudly, in front of 5 employees, Vince didn't step in. He didn't have to. Angela saw it. She walked straight past Vince, straight to the man. "You need to leave," she said to Rick, voice low but firm. Rick glared at her. "Excuse me, you heard me. I'm reporting this." That driver is a vendor. He had nothing to do with your schedule. And this, she gestured toward the group still frozen in place, is unacceptable. You crossed a line. Rick turned red. You don't have the authority. I will write the report myself, and I'll sign it. Along with the names of every witness here. Rick stormed off, cursing under his breath. Angela turned to Vince. You saw that, right? He nodded. Every word. And that was the moment he knew it was time. He went to the break room, pulled out his phone, and called his assistant, quietly. Carefully, he gave instructions, asked for 3 files, told her to arrange a meeting with HR first thing the next morning. Then he sat back down, surrounded by vending machines and silence. Tomorrow, Rick wouldn't be walking into this warehouse again, not as foreman, not ever. Vince arrived early, well before the rest of the crew. Still dressed in his temp uniform, he sat in the far corner of the break room, hands clasped, eyes on the peeling linoleum floor. The door creaked open just after 6, and Angela stepped in, surprised to see him already there. You're in early, she said, setting her thermos on the table. I needed to be, she raised an eyebrow. Something up, Vince nodded once. You'll see. He didn't say more, not yet. By 7, the warehouse was humming. Trucks rolled into the bays, forklifts beeped across the floor. Workers moved in tight, efficient lines. Vince stood near the loading dock, watching it unfold. Rick hadn't arrived yet, but he would. That much was certain. At 7:15, the district manager, Colin Reese, walked in through the side office door. He wore a tailored blazer, clean shoes that had never seen the dock floor, and a look of casual detachment. HR manager Dana followed close behind, holding a tablet. Angela met them near the supply cage. She glanced at Vince once, then turned to Colin. You here for the report? Colin looked confused. Not exactly, just a routine visit. Dana didn't speak. Her expression was unreadable. Rick finally came through the back entrance at 7:20. His pace slowed when he spotted Colin. Then he saw Dana. Then Angela. And finally, Vince, still wearing the orange vest, still standing beside the loading ramp. Rick frowned. What's going on? Vince stepped forward. He pulled off the vest, folded it, and set it on a nearby crate. Then he took off the safety glasses. The beard stayed. It helped keep the disguise, but the posture changed. His shoulders lifted. His eyes hardened. I'm Vince Fairburn, he said, voice calm but firm. Owner of this company. Rick's face drained. What? I've been working here for the past week. Undercover. I've seen everything. Rick's eyes darted toward Colin. Wait, hang on. This is a setup. Colin stepped back, clearly uncomfortable. I wasn't aware of this, Vince. You weren't supposed to be, Vince replied. That's the point. Angela folded her arms. He saw what we've all been dealing with. Rick's mouth opened as if to respond, but Vince raised a hand. I don't want excuses. I saw how you treated Leon. I watched you yell at a vendor for barely speaking English. I heard what you said to your own team. I stood there while you humiliated people in front of their coworkers. And for what? To feel in control. Rick tried to recover. Look, it gets stressful. You've got deadlines, quotas. Stress doesn't give you license to degrade people. Not here. Not anywhere. Colin stepped in, trying to regain control. Maybe we should take this to the office. No, Vince said sharply. This happens here, where everyone can hear it. He turned to the loading crew who had slowly gathered nearby. No one was working now. Even the forklift operators had paused. This man, Vince said, pointing to Rick, is being terminated, effective immediately, not suspended, not warned, fired. Rick stared at him, stunned. You can't just I can, and I am. Dana tapped the tablet, confirming it. Your access ends today. You'll be escorted off the premises. Please gather your things. Rick looked around at the silent workers, at Angela, at Vince, and then stormed toward the exit, muttering under his breath. No one followed him. Vince waited until the door closed behind him before speaking again. I owe you all an apology, he said, facing the crew. I built this company with the idea that people should be treated with respect. Somewhere along the way, I stopped checking if that was still happening. That ends today. The crew remained quiet, unsure. Vince turned to Leon, who stood in the back, arms crossed, eyes wary. You should have never been spoken to like that, not by anyone. Leon nodded but said nothing. Vince looked at Angela. I want you to step in as interim foreperson, effective immediately. Angela blinked. Seriously? You've already been doing the job. You've earned it. Colin shifted uncomfortably. That's not protocol. We typically post internally, then we'll rewrite the protocol, Vince said. Angela accepted with a slow nod, her posture straightening. All right. I'll run it clean. Vince turned back to the team. If any of you have been waiting to speak up about conditions, schedules, anything, you'll have that chance tomorrow. I'm clearing the schedule for one-on-one meetings with every shift, no managers. Just you and me. Someone in the back, possibly Marcus, murmured. About time. Vince didn't react. He simply turned to Dana. Pull every employee report from this warehouse. I want to see what was filed, what wasn't, and who failed to act on it. Dana nodded. Understood. Colin tried once more. We'll need to coordinate with corporate. Corporate will follow our lead this time, not the other way around. Vince stepped toward the rolling doors and looked out over the dock. The trucks were still lined up. The pallets still waited. But for the first time in a long time, the air felt different, like something heavy had been lifted. He turned to Angela. We're short-staffed right now. You need help on the floor? Yes, always. I'll finish the shift, Vince said, slipping the vest back on. You've got a lot to organize. Angela didn't argue. Vince returned to the dock. The crew slowly resumed their tasks, but something had shifted. They moved differently now, not faster, not louder, but with a little less tension in their shoulders. Leon joined him at the next pallet. They worked side by side in silence for a few minutes before Leon finally spoke. You didn't have to come back out here. I know, most people at the top, they just talk. I'm not most people, Vince said. Leon nodded. Guess not. They kept working. The pallet was heavy. The straps were stiff, but they didn't rush. They did it right, and this time no one stood over them, barking orders. Vince stayed on the dock through closing that day. Not as a show of solidarity, but because there was actual work to finish. 3 outbound trailers still needed to be loaded, and the team was short-handed. He didn't speak much. Nobody did, but there was a quiet steadiness to the crew's movements now. The kind that comes when the threat of humiliation is finally gone. Angela spent most of her time in the back office that afternoon, reviewing shift schedules and rewriting the floor rotation system. By the end of the day, she had a printed list on the wall showing revised assignments, rebalanced workloads, and a temporary overtime structure that gave priority to workers who'd been skipped in the past. Nothing flashy, just fair. The next morning, Vince returned without the vest. He'd left it folded neatly on the breakroom table before leaving the night prior. The warehouse buzzed with the usual sounds: pallet jacks grinding, tape guns snapping, but there was a different energy under it all. Less tension, more focus. He met with employees one by one in a small, windowless conference room that had been used mostly for vendor calls. No clipboard, no assistant, just a chair, a legal pad, and a single sentence to start the conversation. Tell me what I haven't been hearing. Teresa came in first. She only sat when he gestured twice. Is this for real? She asked. It is. She didn't waste time. Half the safety gear's cracked or missing. We've sent 2 reports in. Nothing changed. Why wasn't it replaced? Warehouse manager said it wasn't in the quarterly budget. Vince made a note. That changes today. Also, she added, you've got people skipping breaks to hit quotas, not because they want to, because they're afraid of what happens if they don't. Who's enforcing that? Was Rick, sometimes Colin. Vince didn't look up. I'll take care of it. Each meeting brought more detail. Marcus explained how the return system had been overloaded for months because the software hadn't been updated. Leon, still soft-spoken, admitted he'd been doing 2 people's jobs for 3 weeks because no one had replaced a loader who quit. Another worker, a woman named Kiera from the packing line, said she'd been passed over for a team lead position twice, once by someone who lasted 6 weeks, the second time by someone who didn't know the difference between freight codes. By the time the last employee left the room, Vince had filled 3 pages. He walked straight to the warehouse office. Colin was there, standing behind the desk that used to be Rick's, flipping through a stack of reports with forced urgency. Vince shut the door behind him. You knew, he said. Colin looked up. Knew what exactly? That the foreman was running the floor with intimidation, that safety concerns were ignored, that break policies were being bent to meet shipping numbers. Colin closed the folder. It's a high-volume operation, Vince. You don't hit margins by babysitting every complaint. That's not babysitting, that's leadership. You think you can run a warehouse this size without pressure, without someone pushing? Vince stepped forward. Pushing is different than demeaning. Driving results is different than breaking people. Colin's jaw tensed. I've been keeping costs down, turnover manageable, and shipments on time. At the expense of morale. At the expense of people who don't have the power to push back. You want to replace me? I already have. Colin blinked. Excuse me? I sent the paperwork to Dana this morning, effective immediately. Your access will be revoked by end of day. You're making a mistake, he said, standing now. You think these people will work harder just because you smiled at them for a week. They don't need to work harder. They need to work without fear. Colin didn't argue further. He walked out with stiff shoulders, not bothering to close the door behind him. Angela stepped in a few minutes later holding updated shift assignments. There's something you should see, she said, placing a sheet on the desk. It was a sign-up list. Voluntary. Workers had started adding their names to weekend shifts. No one had asked them to. Angela pointed to a few names. These are people who used to leave early just to avoid Rick's last round of berating. Vince looked it over. Keep the weekend schedule optional. No pressure. No guilt, Angela nodded. Understood. By Friday, the warehouse had begun to find its rhythm again. The floor ran smoother, not faster, not flashier, just steadier. Angela walked the aisles every hour, checking in, adjusting assignments, asking questions without hovering. Vince spent his time reviewing repair requests, safety reports, and a backlog of ignored HR documentation that painted a clearer picture than any spreadsheet ever could. He noticed something else, too. People had started talking again. Not just about work, about families, about music. About weekend plans. The break room, once dead silent, now carried the low hum of conversation. Nothing loud, nothing exaggerated, just presence. Late that afternoon, Vince pulled Leon aside while the others were finishing up. You've been doing double shifts, he said. That ends today. You're down to one lane starting Monday. Leon hesitated. I can still handle the extra, you shouldn't have to. I've already approved the hire for a new loader. Leon looked down. Thanks. You ever see things slide again, you come straight to Angela or me. Leon nodded. All right. Vince glanced toward the loading doors. You thinking of staying long-term? I wasn't, Leon admitted. But now, yeah, maybe. Vince didn't push further. He just clapped him lightly on the shoulder and walked back toward the operations office. That evening, as the last of the trucks pulled out, Vince stood by the dock doors, watching the tail lights fade beyond the chain-link gate. The sky was starting to darken. The air carried the grit of diesel and dust, same as always. But inside, something had shifted. He didn't need applause. Didn't want a press release. This wasn't about optics. It was about the people who'd carried the company on their backs while he sat in meetings and reviewed sanitized reports. It was about course correcting before the rot spread further. He turned back toward the warehouse floor, where Angela was walking the final aisle with a checklist in hand, where Kiara was showing a trainee how to read box codes, where Marcus was double-checking the inventory logs without being asked. No raised voices, no tension, just work. Real work. Earned and owned, and now, finally, respected.